The rain hammered against the windows of their modest apartment as Daniel watched his wife stuff the last of her designer clothes into an oversized suitcase. 5 years of marriage, reduced to this moment of cold finality. "You don't understand, Daniel," Victoria said, not even looking at him as she zipped the bag. "I'm 32 years old. I can't keep living like this, counting pennies, shopping at thrift stores, driving that embarrassing 10-year-old sedan." Daniel sat quietly on their worn couch, the same one they'd bought at a garage sale when they first married. His hands clasped together, he watched the woman he loved dismantling their life with clinical efficiency. "We're not poor, Vicky. We have enough. Enough." She whirled around, her eyes flashing with contempt. "Enough for what? To keep living in this cramped apartment? To keep watching my friends vacation in Europe while we camp in state parks? Brandon has already shown me what real life looks like." Brandon Whitmore. The name tasted bitter in Daniel's mouth. A flashy investment banker who drove a Maserati and wore watches worth more than most people's annual salary. They'd met him at Victoria's company networking event 3 months ago, and Daniel had watched his marriage crumble ever since. "I worked double shifts at the hospital to support your business degree," Daniel said quietly. "I thought we were building something together." Victoria's laugh was harsh. "Building what? A life of mediocrity? You're a librarian, Daniel. You make $40,000 a year, and you're content with that. You have no ambition, no drive to be more than what you are." What she didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Daniel's great-aunt Margaret had passed away 7 years ago, leaving him her entire fortune. Margaret had been a reclusive tech investor, one of the earliest backers of companies that became household names. Her estate was worth $500 million. Daniel had told no one. Not his distant cousins, not his few friends, and certainly not Victoria. He'd watched too many families torn apart by inheritance battles, seen too many relationships poisoned by money. He'd wanted his marriage to be built on something real, something pure. The irony wasn't lost on him now. "I provided for us," Daniel continued, his voice steady despite the ache in his chest. "Maybe not lavishly, but we never went hungry. We had a home." "A home." Victoria gestured around the apartment with disdain. "This is a stepping stone, not a home. Brandon's penthouse has more space in the master bathroom than this entire place. He took me to Michelin-star restaurants. He treats me like I'm worth something. And I didn't." For a moment, something flickered in Victoria's eyes, perhaps a shadow of regret, a ghost of the girl who'd married him in a simple courthouse ceremony. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "You treated me like your comfortable roommate," she said, softer now but no less cutting. "You were content to read your books, work your quiet job, and pretend that was enough. I need more. I deserve more." Daniel stood, walking to the window. The city stretched out before him, glittering and indifferent. Somewhere out there, in a high-rise office building, his lawyers managed the fortune that could have given Victoria everything she thought she wanted. The same fortune funded the scholarship programs he'd created anonymously, the libraries he'd renovated, the children's hospitals he'd supported. "I hope Brandon makes you happy," Daniel said finally, turning back to face her. "I really do." Victoria paused at the door, her suitcase in hand. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. My lawyer will send the divorce papers next week. I'm not asking for alimony. I know you don't have anything worth taking." The door clicked shut behind her, and Daniel was alone. He didn't cry. He'd known this was coming for weeks, seen the way Victoria's eyes lit up when Brandon entered a room, noticed how she'd grown cold to his touch. He'd hoped love might be enough, that the foundation they'd built would matter more than money. He'd been wrong. Daniel pulled out his phone and dialed a familiar number. "Thomas? It's me. Yes, I know it's late. I need you to schedule a meeting with the board. It's time I took a more active role in the company." His financial advisor's surprised silence spoke volumes. After 7 years of letting others manage his wealth from the shadows, Daniel was ready to step into the light. Not for Victoria. She'd made her choice. But for himself. The courtroom had been mercifully brief. Victoria's lawyer had been almost apologetic about the whole thing, clearly expecting Daniel to contest something, anything. Instead, he'd signed every paper with quiet efficiency, asking for nothing, demanding nothing. "You're making this very easy, Mr. Ashford," the judge had said, peering at him over her glasses with curiosity. "Most divorces aren't this amicable." Amicable. As if his heart wasn't being carved from his chest with a dull knife. Victoria had barely looked at him. She'd attended the hearing in a dress that cost more than their old monthly rent, a diamond bracelet, undoubtedly from Brandon, catching the fluorescent light. She'd gotten what she wanted, freedom from mediocrity. That was 5 years ago. In the intervening years, Daniel had transformed. Not externally, he still drove a modest car, still lived in a comfortable but unremarkable townhouse. But professionally, he'd stepped out of the shadows and into his birthright. Ashford Technologies had been Margaret's crown jewel, a venture capital firm that had funded some of the most successful tech startups of the past 2 decades. Under Daniel's quiet leadership, it had grown even larger. He'd expanded into sustainable technology, medical innovations, and educational platforms. The business world knew him as DJ Ashford, the reclusive billionaire who rarely appeared in public and never gave interviews. He conducted board meetings via video conference, made decisions from behind closed doors, and let his results speak for themselves. "The Reynolds acquisition is complete," Thomas reported during their weekly call. "We now own controlling interest in their entire portfolio, including their consulting division." Reynolds and Associates. Victoria's employer. Daniel had known this for months, had carefully orchestrated the acquisition through 3 shell companies to ensure no connection to him. It wasn't revenge, he told himself that repeatedly. It was business. Reynolds was undervalued, poorly managed, and ripe for restructuring. That Victoria worked there was simply coincidence. "And the gala?" Daniel asked. "Next Saturday. Black tie. The CEO is expecting you to actually attend this time, sir. It's been 5 years, the board wants to put a face to the name." Daniel hesitated. He'd avoided public events meticulously, conducting his business life like a ghost. But Thomas was right. It was time. "I'll be there." The week passed in a blur of preparation. Daniel worked with an image consultant, not to become someone he wasn't, but to present himself appropriately. The custom tuxedo felt foreign on his frame. He was still the same person who'd spent quiet evenings reading in the library, who preferred documentaries to nightclubs. But now, that person owned the nightclub. Saturday evening arrived with clear skies and a hint of autumn chill. The Grand Belmore Hotel glittered with lights, a beacon for the city's business elite. Daniel's car, tonight, the Mercedes his advisor had insisted on, pulled up to the valet stand. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions he didn't answer. Security guided him through the chaos and into the hotel's opulent ballroom. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors. A string quartet played something classical and expensive. Servers circulated with champagne that cost more per bottle than Daniel's old monthly salary. He accepted a glass he wouldn't drink and scanned the room. "Mr. Ashford." A woman in her 50s approached, her smile bright and practiced. "Catherine Reynolds. I can't tell you how honored we are that you've joined us. Your investment in our company has been transformative." They shook hands. Catherine's grip was firm, her eyes sharp with the intelligence that had built Reynolds from the ground up. She'd be retiring soon, Daniel knew. Her daughter would take over. "I believe in your vision," Daniel said simply. "Your focus on sustainable business practices aligns with my values." As Catherine introduced him to various executives and board members, Daniel's eyes continued to sweep the room. And then he saw her. Victoria stood near the bar, laughing at something a colleague said. She wore an emerald gown that hugged her figure, her hair swept up elegantly. She looked successful, confident, everything she'd wanted to be. And she had no idea he was in the room. "Ah, some of our top performers," Catherine said, following his gaze. "Victoria Whitmore, our senior consultant. Brilliant woman. She's been instrumental in several of our major accounts." Whitmore. She'd taken Brandon's name. "I'd like to meet your team," Daniel said quietly. "All of them." As they crossed the ballroom, Daniel's heart hammered against his ribs. 5 years. 5 years of silence, of building an empire, of becoming everything she'd claimed he could never be. And she'd never known. Victoria turned as they approached, her professional smile already in place. Her eyes passed over Daniel without recognition. Why would she recognize him? He was DJ Ashford, billionaire recluse. Not Daniel, the poor librarian she'd left behind. Mr. Ashford, this is Victoria Whitmore, one of our senior consultants. Victoria extended her hand, her smile confident. Mr. Ashford, it's an honor. Your reputation precedes you. Daniel took her hand. Her skin was the same, soft and warm. Once, he'd held this hand through movie theaters, across dinner tables, in the early morning light of their bedroom. Ms. Whitmore, he said, his voice even. Your work on the Hastings account was impressive. You've read my reports. Surprise flickered across her face. I read everything about companies I invest in. Thoroughness is important, don't you think? Victoria's smile widened, clearly pleased. Absolutely. Attention to detail separates the successful from the mediocre. Mediocre. The word hung between them, invisible to everyone but Daniel. He released her hand and turned to the next person, leaving Victoria glowing from what she perceived as praise from the mysterious billionaire. The evening continued. Daniel made his obligatory appearances, shook the required hands, listened to the predictable pitches. But his awareness never left Victoria, tracking her movements across the room as surely as a compass finds north. She didn't recognize him. Not even a flicker. And that, Daniel realized, hurt more than the divorce ever had. Monday morning brought the announcement. Daniel watched via video conference as Catherine Reynolds addressed the company's main office, her image displayed on the screen in his home study. And so it is with great excitement that I introduce the leadership changes that will guide our company into its next chapter. DJ Ashford, as our majority shareholder, will be taking a more active role in strategic decisions. The camera panned across the assembled employees. Daniel spotted Victoria in the third row, her expression attentive, professional. She had no idea her world was about to tilt. Over the following weeks, Daniel began making his presence known, not in person, but through decisions that rippled through Reynolds and Associates like stones in still water. He attended virtual meetings, offered insights on projects, restructured departments with surgical precision. He never appeared on camera. His voice, filtered through expensive audio equipment and 5 years of change, was unrecognizable. To the employees of Reynolds, he remained a phantom, present but unseen. The consulting division needs new leadership, Daniel told Catherine during one of their private calls. Someone innovative, hungry. Who would you recommend? Catherine pulled up files. Victoria Whitmore has the credentials. She's driven, smart, willing to put in the hours. But, she's going through a difficult time personally. Her divorce just finalized last month. Daniel kept his expression neutral, grateful Catherine couldn't see him. From Brandon Whitmore. You know him. Of him. Investment banker. Reputation for aggressive trading and expensive tastes. Catherine sighed. That's putting it kindly. Apparently, he leveraged himself into massive debt trying to maintain appearances. When the market turned, he lost everything. Victoria's been working overtime trying to rebuild her finances. She actually asked for the maximum number of billable hours. The irony was exquisite. Victoria had left Daniel for Brandon's wealth, and that wealth had evaporated like morning dew. Meanwhile, the poor librarian had become one of the most successful investors in the country. Promote her, Daniel said. Give her the Williamson account. That's our biggest client. Are you sure? If she's as good as you say, she'll handle it. If not, we'll know. Victoria got the promotion. Daniel watched via company reports as she threw herself into the work, pulling late nights, traveling for client meetings, fighting to prove herself worthy of the opportunity. She was brilliant, he'd always known that. Her strategies were innovative, her client management impeccable. She'd become everything she'd wanted to be: successful, respected, financially independent. And she'd done it without ever knowing that the man signing her paychecks was the same one she'd walked away from for being mediocre. 3 months into her new role, Catherine organized a small dinner meeting with key stakeholders. "I think it's time some of our top people met you in person," she told Daniel. "Nothing formal. Just dinner, conversation, building relationships." Daniel agreed, knowing exactly what he was doing. The restaurant was exclusive, the kind of place that didn't advertise because it didn't need to. Daniel arrived early, taking a private room that offered a view of the main entrance. He watched Victoria arrive, dressed in a tailored navy suit that spoke of success earned through hard work. She looked tired, the kind of tiredness that comes from carrying burdens alone. There were fine lines around her eyes that hadn't been there 5 years ago. She'd aged. So had he. When she entered the private dining room and saw him sitting at the head of the table, her professional smile was already in place. Catherine made introductions. "Victoria, this is DJ Ashford." Daniel stood, extending his hand. This time, he let himself truly look at her, let his eyes meet hers for more than a professional moment. Something flickered in her expression. Confusion, perhaps. A sense of familiarity she couldn't quite place. "Mr. Ashford," she said slowly. Have we met before? Outside of the gala?" "I don't believe so," Daniel replied smoothly. "But I've followed your career with interest. Your work is exceptional." Saturday. Dinner progressed through multiple courses, each more elaborate than the last. The conversation flowed around business strategies, market trends, client management. Victoria contributed thoughtfully, her intelligence on full display. And throughout it all, she kept glancing at Daniel, her brow furrowed slightly, as if trying to solve a puzzle she didn't know existed. "You remind me of someone," she said finally, during a lull in conversation. "I can't quite place it." Daniel took a sip of wine. "I have one of those faces." "No," Victoria shook her head. "It's more than that. Your voice, maybe? The way you pause before answering questions." Catherine laughed. "Victoria, don't tell me you're trying to psychoanalyze our benefactor." "Sorry," Victoria flushed slightly. "Professional hazard." As dinner concluded, Daniel walked Victoria to her car, a modest Honda, he noted. Not the luxury vehicle Brandon would have demanded. "Thank you for the opportunity," she said, unlocking her door. "The Williamson account. The promotion. I won't let you down." "I know you won't." She hesitated, her hand on the door. "Can I ask you something personal, Mr. Ashford? Why did you invest in Reynolds? There were bigger companies, more prestigious acquisitions. What drew you to us?" Daniel looked up at the stars, barely visible through the city's light pollution. Sometimes the best investments aren't the obvious ones. Sometimes, you find value in places others overlook. That's surprisingly philosophical for a billionaire. Even billionaires read books, Ms. Whitmore. She laughed, a real laugh, unguarded. For a moment, she was the girl he'd married, the one who'd laughed at his terrible jokes and stolen his hoodies. "Good night, Mr. Ashford." "Good night." He watched her drive away, her taillights disappearing into the urban sprawl. She still didn't know. And he still didn't know why he couldn't bring himself to tell her. The revelation came on a Tuesday. Daniel was in his office, the actual office at Ashford Technologies, not the home study he typically worked from, when his assistant knocked. "Sir, there's a Victoria Whitmore here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent." Daniel's hand stilled over his keyboard. "Send her in." He stood, straightening his tie, his heart rate accelerating in a way no business deal had ever provoked. The door opened. Victoria looked disheveled in a way he'd never seen during her carefully curated professional life. Her hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail, her eyes red-rimmed. She clutched a manila folder like a lifeline. "I know who you are," she said without preamble. "I know who you really are." Daniel gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Please, sit." She remained standing. Don't do that calm, controlled thing. I've spent the last 3 hours going through old photos, city records, business filings. She threw the folder on his desk. Papers scattered, a marriage certificate, divorce decree, newspaper clippings about Ashford Technologies' growth, a photo of them from their wedding day. "Your middle name is James," she continued, her voice shaking. "Daniel James Ashford. But you went by Daniel Ashford then. You worked at the Central Library. We lived at 412, Maple Street, apartment 3B. Daniel sat down slowly. "Yes. Yes." Her laugh was brittle, breaking. "That's all you have to say? Yes. What would you like me to say, Victoria? How about starting with when you became a billionaire? Or why you never told me? Or why the hell you've been watching me work for your company for 5 years without saying anything?" Daniel leaned back in his chair, choosing his words carefully. "My great-aunt Margaret died 7 years ago. She left me her entire estate, $500 million in investments, holdings, and assets." Victoria gripped the edge of his desk. 7 years. We were married 7 years ago. Yes. So when we were together, when I was complaining about money, when I left you for Brandon because you were poor. Her voice trailed off into horrified understanding. "I had more money than you could have spent in several lifetimes, yes." She sank into the chair as if her legs could no longer support her. Her face had gone pale. "Why didn't you tell me? Would it have mattered?" "Of course it would have mattered. I wouldn't have," she stopped abruptly. "Wouldn't have left." Daniel finished quietly. "Wouldn't have chosen Brandon? Wouldn't have divorced me?" Silence filled the office like water, heavy and suffocating. "I wanted to be loved for who I was," Daniel continued. "Not for what I had. My Aunt Margaret lived her entire life surrounded by people who wanted her money. Relatives who visited only when they needed something. Friends who weren't really friends. She died alone, Victoria, in a mansion filled with expensive things and empty relationships. So you tested me." Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. "Our entire marriage was a test." "No." Daniel leaned forward, his voice firm. "Our marriage was real. My love for you was real. The life we built together, modest as it was the most authentic thing I'd ever known. But when you started comparing what we had to what Brandon could offer, when you looked at our life together with contempt, I failed the test. There was no test to fail. You made a choice. You wanted wealth, status, the appearance of success. Those were your values, and you had every right to pursue them." Victoria's hands trembled as she picked up their wedding photo from the scattered documents. They looked so young, so hopeful. Daniel in a simple suit from a department store. Victoria in a white dress she'd found on sale. "I loved you," she said softly. "Before Brandon, before the money became an issue. I really did love you. I know. But I thought you were content to just drift through life. No ambition, no drive. I wanted more." "You wanted things," Daniel corrected gently. "There's a difference between ambition and materialism, Victoria." She flinched as if he'd struck her. "You think I'm shallow." "I think you were young and influenced by a culture that equates worth with wealth. I don't blame you for wanting a better life. I just wish you'd believed that I could provide one, in my own way." "Your own way included sitting on $500 million while I worked double shifts to help pay rent. I contributed equally to our household. You never wanted for necessities. But you let me think we were struggling." Daniel's patience, worn thin by 5 years of silence, finally frayed. "We weren't struggling. You were struggling with the gap between what you had and what you thought you deserved. There's a difference." Victoria stood abruptly, pacing to the window. The city stretched below them, vast and indifferent. "How long have you owned Reynolds?" 18 months. "And my promotion? The Williamson account? Was that charity? Pity for your poor ex-wife?" "It was recognition of your abilities. You earned that promotion, Victoria. I may have facilitated the opportunity, but you succeeded on your own merit." She turned to face him, tears streaming down her face now. Do you have any idea what the last 5 years have been like? Brandon lost everything, the penthouse, the cars, all of it. He'd been living on credit and lies, leveraging debt to maintain an image. When it collapsed, he disappeared. Just left. I found out about the divorce papers from his lawyer. Daniel remained silent, letting her speak. I had to start over. I moved into a studio apartment. I sold everything Brandon had given me. It was all I had of value. I worked 60, 70 hours a week trying to rebuild some kind of life. And the whole time, I thought about you. About how I'd had something real and traded it for fool's gold. Victoria. No, let me finish. She wiped her eyes roughly. I thought about finding you, apologizing. But I was so ashamed. How do you face someone you betrayed because you thought they weren't good enough? How do you admit you were that shallow, that stupid? You weren't stupid. You were human. I was cruel. I told you that you had no ambition, that you'd never be more than a librarian making $40,000 a year. And all along. She laughed bitterly. The irony is exquisite, isn't it? Daniel stood, walking to stand beside her at the window. They watched the city together, two people separated by 5 years and choices that couldn't be unmade. What happens now? Victoria asked finally. That depends. On what? On what you want. She turned to look at him, really look at him, for the first time since entering the office. What do you want, Daniel? It was the first time she'd used his first name. The sound of it, in her voice, after all this time, nearly broke something in him. I want you to be happy, he said honestly. I want you to find whatever it is you're looking for. And I want to stop carrying the weight of who we used to be. So this is goodbye. This is acknowledgement. We were married. We divorced. We've both moved on. You're a talented professional working for a company I own. We can navigate that reality with maturity, or we can make it complicated. Victoria nodded slowly, understanding and hurt mingling in her expression. Professional courtesy. And respect. I do respect you, Victoria. Your work, your resilience, the way you rebuilt your life. That takes strength. Strength born from stupidity. Growth often is. She gathered the scattered papers, shuffling them back into the folder with shaking hands. I should go. I have a client meeting in an hour. Victoria. Daniel caught her wrist gently as she passed. For what it's worth. I forgave you a long time ago. I hope someday you can forgive yourself. She looked down at his hand on her wrist, the same gesture he'd made 1,000 times in their marriage, gentle and grounding. Then she pulled away. Forgiveness is easy when you're winning, Daniel. She left, the door clicking shut with soft finality. Daniel returned to the window, watching until he saw her emerge from the building below, a small figure navigating the lunchtime crowds. She paused on the sidewalk, looking up at his building as if she could see him watching. Then she turned and walked away. 6 weeks passed. Daniel buried himself in work, expanding Ashford Technologies into new markets, launching philanthropic initiatives, building the legacy his aunt had started. He attended board meetings, signed contracts, made decisions that affected thousands of lives. And he tried very hard not to think about Victoria's last words. Forgiveness is easy when you're winning. Was he winning? He had wealth beyond measure, influence that shaped industries, respect from the business world. But he lived alone in a house too large for one person, ate meals in front of computer screens, and hadn't been on a date in 5 years. You're being ridiculous, Thomas told him during one of their weekly calls. You've built an empire. You've done more good through your charitable foundations than most people accomplish in 10 lifetimes. So you had a failed marriage. Join the club. It's not about the marriage failing, Daniel said, staring at the rain pattering against his study window. It's about the silence. I could have told her at any point, before she left, during the divorce, these past 5 years. But I chose silence. What does that say about me? That you're human. That you were hurt. That you wanted her to value you for who you were, not what you had. Or that I'm vindictive. That I wanted her to suffer, to realize what she'd given up. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Are you asking for my opinion or permission to feel guilty? I don't know anymore. The email arrived on a Thursday evening. The subject line read, "Letter of Resignation." Daniel's stomach dropped before he even opened it. Dear Mr. Ashford, please accept this letter as formal notification of my resignation from Reynolds and Associates, effective 2 weeks from today. This decision was not made lightly, but I believe it's necessary for both personal and professional reasons. Working for a company owned by my ex-husband, regardless of his integrity and professionalism, has become untenable. Every project feels tainted by history. Every success feels hollow. Every interaction carries weight that has nothing to do with business. I want to be clear, this is not your fault. You have been nothing but professional. You gave me opportunities one earned but might not have received elsewhere. You've been kind when you had every right to be cruel. But I can't keep pretending that the past doesn't exist. I can't keep walking into that building knowing that you're watching, not because you're vindictive, but because you care enough to notice. And I can't keep carrying the weight of who I was when I was with you. I need to build something that's entirely mine. Something not connected to you, to us, to the choices I made when I was too young and stupid to understand what mattered. Thank you for the opportunities. Thank you for your silence. It was kinder than I deserved. And thank you for letting me go, twice. Professionally yours. Victoria Whitmore. Daniel read the email 3 times, then picked up his phone. Cancel my morning meetings, he told his assistant. All of them. He found Victoria at the small coffee shop 2 blocks from the Reynolds office. She sat alone at a corner table, her laptop open but ignored, staring out the window at the evening traffic. Daniel bought 2 coffees, hers with cream and 2 sugars, the way she'd always taken it, and approached her table. This seat taken. Victoria looked up, surprise and resignation mixing in her expression. Does it matter? You own the building. I don't, actually. Small independent business. Good coffee, though. He set her cup down and sat without waiting for invitation. She stared at the coffee. You remember. I remember everything, Victoria. That's the problem. They sat in silence, the ambient noise of the coffee shop, hissing espresso machines, quiet. Conversations, clinking cups, filling the space between them. I got your resignation, Daniel said finally. I thought you might. I'm not going to accept it. Her eyes snapped to his. Excuse me. I'm not your boss. Technically, Catherine is. But even if I were, I wouldn't accept it. You're too good at what you do. Reynolds needs you. Daniel. But I understand why you feel you need to leave. So I have a proposal. Victoria folded her arms, her expression guarded. I'm listening. I'm selling Reynolds. Catherine's daughter will buy it through a management buyout I'm financing. It'll take 6 months to finalize, but Reynolds will be independent of Ashford Technologies by this time next year. You're selling an entire company because I'm uncomfortable. I'm selling a company because it makes good business sense. Catherine's daughter has vision. The company will thrive under new ownership. That you'll feel more comfortable is a bonus. Victoria picked up her coffee, took a sip, closed her eyes briefly at the familiar taste. Why are you doing this? Because you're right. You need to build something that's entirely yours. And you can't do that while working for me, even indirectly. So this is you letting me go. Again. This is me removing an obstacle to your success. There's a difference. She set down her cup carefully. What do you want, Daniel? Really? Not the professional courtesy answer, not the mature ex-husband response. What do you actually want from me? Daniel considered lying. Considered giving her the easy answer, the one that would let them both walk away clean. But they'd had enough silence, enough unspoken truths. I want to stop wondering what if, he said quietly. I want to stop seeing you and thinking about who we used to be. I want to move forward without carrying the weight of our past. And I think you want the same thing. Forgiveness. Closure. Victoria's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I don't know if I can forgive myself. Every time I see you, I'm reminded of how badly I failed. Not just at marriage, but at basic human decency. I threw away something real for something shiny, and by the time I realized my mistake, it was too late. It's not about forgiveness anymore, Daniel said. It's about acceptance. We were different people then. We made choices based on who we were at that moment. Those choices led us here, to you becoming an accomplished professional, to me stepping into my inheritance. Maybe it all happened exactly as it needed to. You're very philosophical for someone I hurt so badly. I've had 5 years to think about it. And therapy. Lots of therapy. That surprised a laugh out of her, watery but genuine. You? In therapy? Turns out being a secret billionaire with trust issues requires professional help. Who knew? They smiled at each other, tentative but real. Some of the tension eased from Victoria's shoulders. What happens after the sale? She asked. You stay at Reynolds if you want. Build your career. Live your life. I'll do the same. We'll run into each other occasionally at industry events. We'll be cordial, professional, maybe even friendly someday. And that's enough for you? Daniel thought about the question carefully. Was it enough? To release the past, to watch her build a life separate from his, to let go of the girl he'd married and accept the woman she'd become? It has to be, he said finally. Because the alternative is staying frozen in what we were, unable to move forward because we're too busy looking back. I don't want that for either of us. Victoria reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of his. I am sorry. For all of it. For not seeing what I had. For being so focused on what I didn't have that I couldn't appreciate what I did. For hurting you. Daniel covered her hand with his. The touch was familiar and foreign all at once, a ghost of intimacy past, an acknowledgement of separate futures. I know, he said. And I'm sorry too. For the secrets. For the silence. For letting you leave without fighting for us. We both made mistakes. Is this goodbye? This is release. For both of us. Victoria nodded, tears finally spilling over. But she was smiling too, sad and relieved and exhausted all at once. Thank you. For the coffee, the conversation, the closure. And for being the kind of man who could have destroyed me but chose kindness instead. You destroyed yourself enough, Victoria. You didn't need my help. She laughed through her tears. Fair point. They finished their coffee, talking about small things, industry gossip, book recommendations, the quirks of city life. It was easy, comfortable, the way it had been before money and ambition complicated everything. When they finally stood to leave, Victoria hesitated. Kaniukyo. Is that weird? Probably. But let's do it anyway. The hug was brief, bittersweet, a period at the end of a long sentence. When they separated, something had shifted. The weight Daniel had carried for 5 years felt lighter. Take care of yourself, he said. You too. And Daniel? Thank you for being poor when we met. It's the only way I could have loved you for the right reasons first, even if I lost sight of them later. You loved me. Completely. Just not enough to overcome who I thought I needed to be. She smiled sadly. That's something I'll have to live with. She walked away, her silhouette disappearing into the evening crowd. Daniel watched until she was gone, then looked up at the darkening sky. His phone buzzed. Thomas, probably with some urgent matter requiring his attention. But for the first time in 5 years, Daniel silenced it. He walked home slowly, letting the city wash over him. The noise, the lights, the endless movement of people pursuing their own dreams and making their own mistakes. Somewhere out there, Victoria was doing the same. Building a life, learning from her past, moving forward. And so was he. The fortune his aunt left him had given him power, influence, the ability to change lives and shape industries. But it had also taught him what Victoria learned too late, that worth isn't measured in wealth, that value isn't determined by material success, and that the richest life is one lived authentically, surrounded by people who know your true self. Daniel smiled to himself, a genuine expression that felt rusty from disuse. Tomorrow, he'd dive back into work. He'd finalize the Reynolds sale, launch the new educational initiative, attend the board meetings and make the decisions expected of him. But tonight, for the first time in 5 years, he felt free. The fortune was never the point. The silence was never revenge. It was all just life, messy and complicated and human, teaching its lessons in the ways it always does, through pain, growth, and the slow accumulation of wisdom earned by living through both. Daniel walked into his empty house, made himself dinner, and settled in with a book he'd been meaning to read for months. He was, after all, still a librarian at heart. Just one who happened to have $500 million.